Dr. Anthony Fauci, keeping an open mind, the most trusted voice in the pandemic, certainly for separating fact from fiction, in recent days appears to be modifying his stance and has indicated to CNN's Jim Acosta that another possibility was that a virus accidentally escaped a lab after being taken from an environment. But he couches that statement with the position that there are no lab leaks that have led to pandemics. So there have been accidents in the labs, none that have led to pandemics. According to Dr. Fauci, there has never been a situation where a virus has escaped from a lab that's a brand new virus that no one has ever seen before that led to a pandemic. That simply has never happened. And apparently that suggests that any research upon a virus would never escape by accident. And were this simply an accident, with over 6.8 million fatalities worldwide, it would be one of unprecedented enormity and magnitude. And the origins debate continues in the press and now in the Congress, even as new evidence emerges from China for consideration. According to the initial investigative team from the WHO in China, upon examination of the novel coronavirus, they had found a genome identity of 96% to a bat SARS-like coronavirus and 86 to 92% to a pangolin SARS-like coronavirus. But a recent study co-authored by Jingli Shi, popularly described as the Bat Woman, now claims the virus shares 79.5% genome identity with SARS-CoV-1 and also uses angiotensin-converting enzyme 2, H2, as a cell entry receptor. And in this report, Dr. Shi notes that apart from the respiratory system, multiple organs, including the immune system of COVID-19 patients, were also targeted by SARS-CoV-2 infection. Notably, lymphopenia was observed in 83.2% of the patients on admission, and fatal infections were associated with more severe lymphopenia over time. Lymphopenia, also called lymphocytopenia, is a disorder in which your blood doesn't have enough blood cells called lymphocytes, according to the NIH. AIDS patients routinely have lymphocytopenia, which arises from destruction of CD4 plus T cells infected with HIV, according to Merck Pharmaceuticals manuals. According to Dr. Shi, lymphocytes, particularly T cells, play a central role in the human immune system, a decrease of which would result in immune suppression and serious complications. Apoptosis is a form of cell death, and according to Dr. Shi, in the case of MERS-CoV, apoptosis induced by direct viral infection of T cells has been observed in vitro, which possibly explained lymphopenia in MERS patients. Similarly, SARS-CoV-1 viral particles were also observed in multiple leukocytes from an autopsy study, suggesting that direct infection might account for the decrease in lymphocytes. It is now recognized, however, by Dr. Shi that SARS-CoV-2 particles or proteins were also found in the spleen and lymph nodes from a study of 91 deceased COVID-19 cases, suggesting an infection of lymphocytes. Furthermore, in COVID-19 immune landscape depicted by single-cell RNA seq studies, SARS-CoV-2 viral RNA has been found in multiple immune cells, including myeloid cells with phagocytic activity, neutrophil and macrophage, and lymphocytes without phagocytic activity, T, B, and NK cells. It is generally believed that H2 is the entry receptor for SARS-CoV-2. And in this recently peer-reviewed study, although submitted in September 2021, Dr. Shi had shown that SARS-CoV-2 infected T lymphocytes, mainly CD4 plus T cells, in an H2-independent manner. Moreover, SARS-CoV-2 infection triggered pronounced T cell deaths, which potentially contributed to lymphopenia in patients with COVID-19. Some may recall a preprint published by Prashant Pradhan on January 31st, 2020, that had claimed that they had found 4 insertions in the spike glycoprotein S, which are unique to the 2019 NCOV and are not present in other coronaviruses. Dr. Pradhan had emphasized that amino acid residues in all the 4 inserts have identity or similarity to those in HIV-1 GP120 or HIV-1 GAG. Yet, despite the inserts being continuous on the primary amino acid sequence, 3D modeling of the 2019 NCOV suggested that they converged to constitute the receptor binding site, which would not conflict directly with Shi's claims on the face that SARS-CoV-2 infected T lymphocytes, mainly CD4 plus T cells, in an H2 independent manner. Dr. Pradhan had concluded that the finding of 4 unique inserts in the 2019 NCOV, all of which have identity, similarity to amino acid residues in key structural proteins, is unlikely to be fortuitous in nature. However, Dr. Prashant's research paper, just a preprint, was highly controversial and greatly contested when it was published, and on February 2nd, 2020, 2 days after it had been submitted, was withdrawn by its authors, who had claimed at the time that they intended to revise it in response to comments received from the research community on their technical approach and their interpretation of the results. And in 3 years, they have never submitted an amended article. Dr. Shi's recent findings are quite distinguishable in that, first, she makes no claim that her findings are not present in any other coronaviruses, and in fact states that similar characteristics have been found in the predecessors of SARS-CoV-2, SARS, and MERS, which may suggest a common origin. Further, Dr. Shi stated that our discovery of H2-independent infection of T cells is surprising, but is also supported by previous discoveries that there are SARS-CoV-2 RNA plus cells which did not co-express H2 and TMPRSS2. And while Dr. Prashant had advanced the claim that they had found 4 insertions in the spike glycoprotein S, Dr. Shi draws attention to yet another of recent discoveries involving multiple alternative attack points for the novel coronavirus, far more uniquely adapted to human physiology than previously known. Since LFA1 is expressed in a number of other leukocytes, it can be expected that other immune cells, including macrophages or monocytes, could also be infected by SARS-CoV-2, potentially through binding with LFA1, the newly identified element, and goes on to note that the identification of LFA1 as an entry molecule that contributed to SARS-CoV-2 infection of T cells would be important for developing clinical therapeutics, though future questions remain. From a clinical perspective, Dr. Shi has made no claim that while presenting similar damage to the immune system, specifically the T cells, producing lymphocytopenia and apoptosis like an HIV infection and AIDS, that the causative agent LFA1 is either present in AIDS virus even though certainly it is known within recent years amongst those engaged in AIDS research that LFA1 alone is sufficient to induce active T-cell polarization and recruitment of the microtubule organization center in HIV-1 infected cells, as reported in 2016 by Shimona, Starling, and Claire Jolly of Virology in the Journal of Virology. These researchers have reported that mutant cell lines coupled with inhibitors demonstrated that LFA1 induced polarization was dependent on the T-cell kinase ZAP70 or ZAP70, and LFA1 is a key determinant in inducing dynamic T-cell remodeling. Why LFA1 might be present in both AIDS and the recent emerging coronaviruses, including SARS, MERS, and now the novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, Dr. Shi makes no claim, nor expresses any concern. And intriguingly, Dr. Shi makes no claim that this new discovery would be unlikely to be fortuitous in nature, nor offers any explanation why this occurrence should be viewed as something naturally occurring in the nature of human coronaviruses, sharing a lineage to bat coronaviruses, the body of knowledge for which she has been nicknamed by many the Bat Woman. HIV-positive persons had a significantly higher risk of SARS-CoV-2 infection and mortality from COVID-19 than HIV-negative individuals. And the most common comorbidities in the HIV-positive population were hypertension, diabetes, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and chronic kidney disease, as reported by Patty Sesitongo in March 2021. The total death rate in HIV-positive patients with COVID-19 was about 9%. That's compared with a overall case fatality rate of only 1.1% nationwide, as reported by Motion Heidery in April 2022. Katie Siddle, who had taken part in the CDC Mortality and Morbidity Weekly Report immediately after the outbreak in Provincetown, had noted in her follow-up article, published in Cell Journal on December 22, 2022, that historical public health outreach in the gay community may have helped mitigate the impact of that outbreak, and that had resulted in the breakthrough infections that she had, through genomic sequencing, determined to have been attributed to only one individual, infecting others at multiple locations, or several individuals with the same virus from either a common source or serial infection transmitting independently. Almost 1,000 primarily gay men, where 74% of the reported cases were fully vaccinated individuals, of whom 79% were found symptomatic. The outbreak in Provincetown was the first large, well-characterized outbreak of COVID-19 in highly vaccinated populations in the United States, and contributed to the CDC recommendation for indoor masking on vaccinated individuals, primarily infecting gay men, a community that has been conspicuously silent in the debate regarding the proximal origins of the virus. And yet, as Dr. Christian G. Anderson had warned, failure to comprehensively investigate the zoonotic source or origin through collaborative and carefully coordinated studies would leave the world vulnerable to future pandemics arising from the very same human activities that have repeatedly put us on a collision course with novel viruses. Dr. Rochelle Walensky has noted that this virus isn't stupid and that human behavior in this pandemic hasn't served us very well. The WHO director has lamented that surely we have learned by now that we underestimate this virus at our own peril. And Dr. Anthony Fauci, a controversial figure throughout the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, appears now to have conceded tragically as to the elusive mystery of how this natural evolution may have occurred. We may never know. And so there we have it. Some mysteries, even for science, may never be known to mankind, but perhaps one day some breakthrough may help to resolve this mystery. What a remarkable achievement that shall be for science, and yet what a tremendous loss for storytelling. Perhaps the answer is before our very